Ladies and gentlemen, Microsoft have unveiled, wait for it, Windows 10. That's right, they are skipping Windows 9 and moving straight on to Windows 10. It's not going to be called Windows 1, it's not going to be called purely Windows, it's going to be known as Windows 10. And Microsoft say the reason they're skipping Windows 9 is, well, when you see it in action, you'll understand why. Now, personally, I think that they want to move away quite a bit from Windows 8. I think they realise that it's had quite a lot of negative reputation. So we're going to discuss my thoughts and opinions based on the news. There's going to be a technical preview of this released in the next day or two. And I'm certainly going to be covering it very in-depth, so I'm going to be doing an in-depth article, most likely a video, probably showing you how to run it on a virtual machine and so on. But for now, we're just going to discuss what my thoughts are with their announcement. And because, to be honest, the images have already been leaked anyway. The images that we're seeing are very similar to the ones that have already been released on technical leaks and previews. So rather than just showing you those same images, I'd rather kind of focus on the announcement and then show you a whole slew of new stuff that go really under the bonnet with the technical preview. It's not really a surprise Microsoft have decided to distance themselves somewhat from Windows 8. They even admitted that only 1 in 5 people who are involved in businesses, enterprises, those type of individuals, 1 in 5 were using Windows 8. And basically, older versions of Windows were being used in corporate environments. The reason is it wasn't really suitable, both for multitasking purposes and creative purposes. It just felt too clunky. No more, says Microsoft. They have listened to fans. Now, you've probably seen, I have already covered this in a leak, well, a rumour, but now it's actually turned into yes, this is how it actually looks. The Windows Start menu is back. It now integrates almost like the tiled interface of the start screen into it. It's much smaller, so the start menu looks a little bit like the Vista menu, but the left-hand side is now just the pure start menu, and then on the right-hand side it's got a very small tiled interface. It looks a lot better, in my personal opinion. I really hated the tiled interface of Windows 8. It just didn't really work well. They're now adding more, and would I go to say obvious features? For example, virtual desktops are finally being added. We're going to be seeing flexible app windowing. There's going to be the Cortana Digital Assistant and much, much more. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Microsoft are pushing this to be what we really want, a modern operating system that's very configurable. And that's the key word here. It's not going to be, this is cute, that's all there is to it. It's going to be that you can have a very technical type of desktop. It could be configured to be very powerful. On the other hand, it could also be very simplistic and just look very pretty if that's the type of system that you want. And they do want to make sure as well that there is a good deal of flexibility if you're utilizing, for example, the 2-in-1s or convertible devices. For example, they are giving the example of the Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro. What they said is that charms are going to be moved over for that, as well as all the touchscreen functionality if that's the type of device that you're going to be using. The purpose here is it's going to be very configurable, however. So in other words, if you plug in a mouse and keyboard, the system's going to be smart enough to know that. Now, as I said, there will be a technical preview coming out. However, it's not going to be focused on gamers. Instead, it's going to be more focused on folks in the business orientation. So in other words, if you can imagine you are maybe working in the IT division of a certain company, you need to see, hey, is this something that's good for us? Does this work for our databases? Does this work for our clientele? Will this work for our environment? And that's extremely, extremely important. The tiles and icons are now basically a blend of classic and universal apps. So that's what Joe Belfler has said from Microsoft. They don't want to lose the duality. They now want to focus on PCs with mice and keyboards and make sure that they have a very familiar and comfortable looking UI. So the operating system itself is going to be unveiled, or formally released, shall I say, at some point early next year. We haven't got an exact date, at least as far as I'm aware of right now. But they are making sure that the system runs better for those of us who are using a traditional mouse and keyboard, which in my opinion is absolutely vital. Let's be totally honest here. There are multiple problems Microsoft have had with Windows. From a server point of view and from a production standpoint, it's not been ideal. I personally am only running Windows 8.1 now because I cannot be bothered to switch to Windows 7. I know that sounds really lazy, but it's going to take me some time to switch it, reinstall the drivers, install all the applications that I need, blah 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 blah. I just can't be bothered to do it. I'll just be totally blunt. And so because of that, I'm stuck with Windows 8.1, but aside from that, I just prefer the overall workflow and the ease of Windows 7. And the problem is, many feel the same. If you're a programmer, if you're a developer, if you're like someone who even uses a lot of word processing, for example, there's not really a compelling reason to say to yourself, well, you know what, Windows 8 is definitely better. And that's not a good situation to be in. Clearly no one's worried that Linux is going to overtake Microsoft, but long term they do need to start thinking about this stuff. Now, I realise many of you are probably going to say, well, what about the latest versions of DirectX? What's happening there? Unfortunately, there's not been really an announcement. It is fairly safe, I would imagine, to say that DirectX is going to be available at some point next year for Windows 10, but it's likely it's not going to be released with Windows 10. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's an update. Because Microsoft, from the rumours that I'm hearing and from what Microsoft have commented, Windows 10 is going to be released first, and then we're going to be seeing DirectX at a later date, for example, the mid to later half of the year, which would make sense. It could just be a simple update. There are also reasons behind that. Even if Windows DirectX 12 was released, there are no games at the moment which support it. GPUs supposedly do. Supposedly Maxwell supports it, but just how much of the feature set and so on, it remains to be seen. And we know that in AMD are of course going to be releasing the 300 range. That's in a separate video today. You can check that out if you're into PC gaming. And once again, how much of that feature set is being used for DX12? We would imagine quite a bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's full DX12 support, but once again, I don't know. I'm only going on that based upon the fact that it's going to be released later than Maxwell, so you'd assume so. What personally I'm hoping for as well is Microsoft improve the chances of you recovering from crashed applications. Now, Windows has definitely gotten better, but I would say still that Windows 7, particularly when a game crashes, have you ever... Genuine question. Are you someone who suffers from when a game crashes? This could happen sometimes if you Alt and Tab or whatever, and the game crashes, and then it does that. It's part of the background, so now all you can see is like the start menu. This happens to me a lot. So when I press start will appear, and you can see the taskbar, but you can't see anything else. You control Alt Delete, and it will be now behind the application because the game is basically the one that's at front, and it's extremely annoying to get out of that. It didn't really happen to me nowhere near as much with Windows 7 as it does Windows 8. It's an incredibly annoying issue, and hopefully that's something Microsoft is going to solve. Overall, Windows 8 is fairly stable, however, but it certainly could have some improvements on the crashing and reliability side of things to Windows 10. Microsoft as a company are definitely starting to change. Things are changing incredibly well. For Microsoft. They're of course pushing their Azure technology, they're trimming the fat, they're improving their Nokia division, so to speak, and they are releasing this technical build, this pre-release software. Now the point being of course is that, well, not all of the stuff is going to run smoothly. I will be covering it quite in depth, and I'd like to point out that if you are running a production machine, don't jump on Windows 10 and rely on it, because obviously there can be issues. So you can have like a memory dump issue or blue screen of death. You could have a situation where a game just doesn't run for some reason because it doesn't recognize the environment, and it can get scared and terrified and confused and frightened. or your graphics card drivers aren't stable, or whatever. So obviously that's the issue with technical previews, but once again, this is primarily focused on those who are technically adept and they may be looking to see how it functions in a work environment. Now what I do want to go ahead and do is go back to the release date stuff, because I'm actually hearing a little bit of an update as of recording this video. There were early reports when the system... I'm literally recording this as this thing was released, but accordingly there has been a slight update on this. Originally I heard that it was actually going to be released early 2015. I don't know the exact date, once again, just to reiterate, and now they're saying it's going to be released a little bit later in 2015, so it could coincide with DirectX 12, or it could still happen at a slightly different phase. So we'll have to just wait on that one. But as I said, from what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, I'm much preferring the sound of Windows 10 to what I am Windows 8. I do feel that some of this is just pure marketing. I think they want to distance themselves as much as possible. They want to make sure that it's fairly obvious. Now, Microsoft have been extremely forthcoming in saying that they want a Windows experience that is recognizable across multiple different devices. In other words, you don't become like what's going on when you go from a tablet to a desktop. Instead, they want it to feel intuitive. So in other words, you would intuitively use your mouse, but then when you, despite the fact that the environments look very similar, if you use say a tablet, it's still intuitive, it still looks like Windows, but you would interact naturally with it. And I do feel that this operating system theoretically should scale up and down accordingly, well, basically based on the environment that you're working from. From my own personal standpoint, however, I would like to see what Microsoft are going to do with the whole gaming situation. It's not surprising that there is a lot of media attention already on the gaming aspirations, because Gabe Newell from, of course, Valve, one of the reasons supposedly he started to push towards the Steam OS was because he really didn't like the direction Microsoft were going Windows 8. He basically said the Windows 8 was a travesty, particularly when it came to the Windows Store, which I still don't really like the whole integration of that as well. Now, I'm going to give one final overview from a few little bits I'm hearing. Supposedly, Windows 9 will be able to run pretty much all modern apps in a standard desktop in Windows mode, which was going to be very great, in my personal opinion, because it's going to allow you to easily switch between applications. This is something I was saying that ties into the whole virtual desktop idea as well. Some are saying that there's going to be a desktop version of Cortana, which of course is Microsoft's version of Siri, but the rumours are that this is going to be tied into the Bing search engine. So just how much love Cortana is going to get remains to be seen, of course. Anyway, guys, I think that's just about it. That's a rumour roundup for everything that I've heard right now, as the press event is kind of wrapping up. So that's my thoughts and opinions. As I said, I will be covering the technical preview quite in depth, going into my thoughts and opinions of it, and going into maybe the command line interface and the security settings and network and all of that general crap. But hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care, and bye for now.